The beginning of the conflict, the tale of the War of Basus, is one of the most famous and enduring legends in Arab history, often used as a symbol of how small disputes can escalate into protracted conflicts. It unfolded in the pre-Islamic Arabian Peninsula, a time when tribal alliances and honor dictated the fabric of society. Background: the story revolves around two prominent tribes, Banu Taghlib and Banu Bakr, both part of the larger Rabia Confederation. Their rivalry had been simmering for generations, marked by competition over resources, grazing lands, and tribal pride. This rivalry would ignite into a 40-year war because of an insult to honor. Key figures: Basus ibn Murrah, a leader of Banu Bakr and nephew to Basus; Kulayb ibn Rabia, a fearsome warrior, leader of Banu Taghlib, and known for his power and arrogance; Basus, an elderly woman and a guest of Banu Bakr, whose seemingly minor grievance would set off a devastating chain of events. The incident: Kulayb ibn Rabia was notorious for his strict control over the grazing lands in his territory. His word was law, and even other tribes tread carefully around him. One day, Basus arrived as a guest in the camp of her nephew, Basus. She brought with her a camel, which strayed into Kulayb's protected grazing area. When Kulayb discovered the camel, he killed it in a display of his authority, deeming it a violation of his rules. Basus, deeply offended by this act, composed a lamentation that appealed to tribal honor. The verses subtly called for vengeance, and they resonated deeply with her kin. The catalyst: Basus, incensed by Kulayb's actions and spurred on by Basus's lament, decided to take matters into his own hands. He ambushed and killed Kulayb, marking the point of no return. The murder of a tribal leader was an unforgivable act, and it demanded retribution under the code of honor that governed Arabian tribes. The outbreak of war: Kulayb's death plunged the two tribes into chaos. Banu Taghlib demanded justice, while Banu Bakr stood by Basus, claiming he was defending their tribe's honor. Negotiations failed, and hostilities began. The initial skirmishes quickly escalated into a full-blown war. Part 2. The war unfolds. The murder of Kulayb ibn Rabia unleashed a storm that would ravage the Arabian Peninsula for decades. The tribal feud between Banu Taghlib and Banu Bakr transformed into a generational conflict, sustained by cycles of vengeance, shifting alliances, and a relentless pursuit of honor. Early battles following Kulayb's death, Banu Taghlib launched an immediate retaliation against Banu Bakr, attacking their camps and herds. These raids were met with counter-raids, and the conflict spread rapidly across the region. What initially began as sporadic clashes soon evolved into organized warfare, with both tribes rallying their warriors and seeking allies from neighboring clans. Tribal poets and orators played a significant role, using their verses to inflame passions and solidify support. Legendary duels. The war became the stage for heroic individual combats, where tribal champions fought to uphold their honor. Among these was Al-Zir Salim, Kulayb's brother, who emerged as one of the most iconic figures in the war. Al-Zir vowed vengeance for his brother's death, dedicating his life to avenging Kulayb and restoring the honor of Banu Taghlib. His name became synonymous with perseverance and loyalty, as he led countless attacks against Banu Bakr, refusing to relent even as the years passed. Stalemates and shifting fortunes. Despite the ferocity of the battles, neither side could claim a decisive victory. The harsh desert environment and the nomadic lifestyle of the tribes contributed to the prolonged nature of the conflict. Resources were scarce, and both tribes suffered significant losses in terms of lives, wealth, and livestock. Occasionally, attempts were made to broker peace, often led by neutral tribes. However, these efforts were short-lived, as the deeply rooted hatred and desire for vengeance overshadowed any hope for reconciliation. The role of poetry and culture. The War of Basus was not only a physical conflict, but also a cultural and psychological battle. Poets from both sides composed verses that glorified their tribe's valor and denounced the enemy. These poems were recited in gatherings, serving as a means of propaganda and a way to keep the memory of past grievances alive. One of the most famous verses from the era is attributed to Basus, whose lament over her camel became a symbol of the war's origins. Her words continued to fuel the fire of vengeance, ensuring that the conflict remained deeply personal for both tribes. Generational impact. As the years turned into decades, the war became less about the original dispute and more about maintaining the honor of each tribe. Children who were born after Kuleib's death grew up hearing stories of his murder and the subsequent betrayal. These narratives perpetuated the cycle of hatred, ensuring that the conflict would not end with the original participants. Part 3. The Resolution. After 40 years of bloodshed, destruction, and despair, the War of Basus finally came to an end. The resolution was not the result of a decisive battle, but rather the natural exhaustion of both tribes and a growing realization of the futility of the conflict. The toll of war. By the later years of the war, both Banu Taghlib and Banu Bakr were significantly weakened. Their populations had dwindled, resources were depleted, and alliances had faltered. The prolonged nature of the conflict left both tribes vulnerable to external threats, and their survival depended on finding a resolution. The younger generation, many of whom had never known peace, began questioning the purpose of the war. While honor and vengeance were deeply ingrained in their culture, the endless cycle of violence had robbed them of stability and prosperity. The role of mediators, neutral tribes, and respected figures stepped in to mediate between the warring sides. Among them was Hujr ibn Amr al-Kindi, a leader known for his wisdom and ability to broker peace. His influence, combined with the growing pressure from neighboring tribes tired of the conflict's spillover effects, created an opportunity for reconciliation. Hujr appealed to the shared ancestry and kinship of the two tribes, reminding them that their continued fighting only served to dishonor their common heritage. Over time, his efforts bore fruit, and both tribes agreed to meet for negotiations. The peace agreement. The final truce was marked by a solemn gathering of tribal leaders and elders from both sides. The agreement required mutual forgiveness and the renunciation of further vengeance. To symbolize the end of hostilities, reparations were exchanged, and oaths of peace were sworn before witnesses. Key to the reconciliation was the recognition of each tribe's sacrifices and losses. Both sides acknowledged the pain they had inflicted upon each other, and this acknowledgement allowed for the possibility of healing. Legacy of the war. Though the war had ended, its memory lingered for generations. The War of Basus became a cautionary tale, a powerful reminder of how minor disputes could escalate into devastating conflicts. Poets and storytellers immortalized the events, ensuring that future generations would learn from the mistakes of their ancestors. The story also reinforced the importance of justice, honor, and the need for restraint. It highlighted the dangers of pride and vengeance, values that continue to shape Arab culture for centuries. Reflection. The War of Basus remains one of the most iconic and tragic episodes in Arab history. While it was a tale of bravery and loyalty, it also served as a stark warning about the consequences of unchecked anger and tribal divisions. Ultimately, it was a story of human resilience and the power of reconciliation, proving that even the deepest wounds could heal with time and wisdom.